Nobody noticed the Black Maid quietly cleaning around them at the luxury resort's corporate retreat. Serena Jackson kept her head down, her uniform crisp, her movements efficient. The wealthy executives barely glanced her way, just another invisible worker in their privileged world. Even Elliot Vance, the arrogant CEO who strutted through the ballroom delivering his speech about leadership, didn't recognize her. How could he? 8 years had passed since he'd crushed her dreams at Georgetown Law. When he rudely berated her for a spilled drink, Serena finally looked up and spoke one simple sentence. The room froze. Elliot's face drained of color. No one expected what would happen next. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The Aspen Pines Resort glittered in the early evening sun, its grand windows reflecting the last golden rays across the pristine lake. Inside the main ballroom, the annual Vance Consulting Leadership Retreat was in full swing. Crystal champagne flutes clinked, expensive perfume mingled with the scent of gourmet hors d'oeuvres, and laughter bounced off marble pillars as executives in tailored suits congratulated themselves on another record-breaking year. Serena Jackson moved through the crowd like a ghost. At 29, she possessed a quiet grace that made her nearly invisible in her pressed gray housekeeping uniform. She collected empty glasses and wiped spills with practiced efficiency, her expression revealing nothing as conversations flowed around her as if she weren't there. Can you believe these quarterly numbers? A young executive gestured wildly, accidentally knocking over his champagne. He didn't even glance at Serena as she appeared with a cloth. Oh, whatever, someone will get that. Someone already is. His colleague muttered, barely acknowledging Serena with a flick of his eyes. Across the room, Claire Harper, the vice president of communications, noticed the interaction. At 35, Claire had fought her way to the executive level through determination and savvy networking. Unlike many of her peers, she remembered what it was like to be overlooked. As Serena finished cleaning, Claire approached her. "Thank you," Claire said softly, her voice genuine. "These guys can be a bit much after a few drinks." Serena looked up, momentarily surprised. "Just doing my job, ma'am." Claire caught something in Serena's eyes. Intelligence, assessment, perhaps even amusement, before the maid's expression returned to its neutral state. Before Claire could say more, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. Elliot Vance had arrived at a T-47. Vance commanded the room with practiced authority. His salt and pepper hair was perfectly styled, his custom suit impeccably tailored to his tall frame. His entrance was calculated, late enough to make an impression, but not so late as to appear disrespectful to the board members present. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, voice carrying effortlessly across the ballroom without the need for a microphone. Another year, another billion in revenue. Applause erupted as Elliot made his way to the small stage set up at the front of the room. He grabbed a microphone and surveyed his audience with the confidence of a man who knew his worth and made sure everyone else knew it too. "When I started this company 15 years ago, people said I was too aggressive, too demanding." He paused, his eyes scanning the crowd. They were right. And that's why we're here today while there. Well, wherever failed consultants go. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Elliot continued, his voice growing more passionate. "Leadership isn't about making friends. It's about vision. It's about discipline. It's about knowing the difference between those who serve and those who lead." His gaze hardened slightly. "In this room, we have leaders. Out there," he gestured vaguely toward the door, "are those who serve. Know your place, demand your worth, and never apologize for success." Near the back of the room, Serena continued her work, her face betraying nothing as she collected discarded napkins. Claire watched her from across the room, wondering what thoughts might be running behind those observant eyes. After Elliot's speech, the evening progressed with dinner and more drinking. Executives loosened their ties and conversations grew louder. Serena moved efficiently between tables, cleaning up spills and collecting plates. The evening was winding down when disaster struck at a junior executive, eager to impress Elliot, approached him with a fresh drink just as Elliot turned, resulting in red wine splashing across Elliot's pristine white shirt and onto the floor. "Jesus Christ," Elliot exploded, drawing every eye in the room. The young executive stammered apologies, but Elliot had already dismissed him with a cutting remark. Serena appeared almost instantly with towels and cleaning supplies. As she knelt to clean the spill on the floor, Elliot's frustration found a new target. "This is a $5,000 suit," he snapped, glaring down at Serena as she worked. "Can't you people do anything right around here?" The room quieted. Serena continued cleaning, her movements precise and unrushed. "Hey, I'm talking to you." Elliot's voice grew louder. "Can't you do your job right? Or do you need someone to teach you how to mop too?" The silence in the room was absolute now. Even those who typically ignored the staff were uncomfortable with the public humiliation. Claire took a half step forward, then hesitated, caught between her corporate position and her sense of decency. Serena slowly stood, cloth in hand, and looked directly into Elliot's eyes. "You taught me more than you know, Professor Vance." The sentence landed like a thunderclap. Elliot's face, flushed with anger moments before, drained of color. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Across the room, Malcolm Vance, Elliot's 22-year-old son and recent business graduate, straightened in his chair, his eyes widening as he looked between his father and the maid. Claire stared at Serena, her mind racing to place the woman's face in a different context. Nervous laughter broke out as people tried to process what had just happened. Elliot recovered quickly, his face hardening into a mask of cold fury. "Who the hell do you think you are?" he demanded, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Before Serena could respond, Marjorie Ellis, the 60-something head of housekeeping, appeared at her side. "Mr. Vance, I apologize for the interruption," she said firmly. "Serena, please finish cleaning in the East Wing." Serena nodded, gathered her supplies, and left the room without another word. The moment she was gone, Elliot turned to Marjorie. "I want her fired." Immediately, Marjorie's expression remained professional, but there was steel behind her eyes. "Of course, Mr. Vance. I'll handle the situation first thing tomorrow morning." "Not tomorrow. Tonight." "Sir, with all due respect, we're short-staffed as it is. For this event, I promise I'll address this properly tomorrow." Elliot glared at her, then at the door through which Serena had disappeared. "Fine, but I want to know how a woman like that got this job in the first place." He turned to Claire. "Harper, look into this. I want to know who she is and why she's here." Claire nodded, her curiosity already piqued. "Yes, sir." The event wrapped up early, the energy dampened by the confrontation. As executives retreated to their luxury cabins, staff returned to their more modest quarters in a separate building on the resort grounds. When Serena entered the staff break room, conversation stopped. The other housekeepers and maintenance staff looked at her with a mixture of awe and concern. One of the older women, Martha, broke the silence. "Girl, you've got guts. I've never seen anyone stand up to Mr. Vance like that." Serena shrugged, removing her apron. "Sometimes words just come out." "Did you really know him before?" "As a professor?" asked another maid. Serena's expression closed off. "It's complicated and not worth talking about." Later that evening, alone in her small room, Serena sat on her bed and pulled out a dog-eared legal textbook from beneath it. She flipped through the pages, covered in neat, detailed notes in her handwriting, then put it away and pulled out a small locked drawer from under her bed. Inside was a diploma, a law degree with her name on it, stamped "disbarred" across the front, and a handwritten note that simply read, "Don't let him win again." Meanwhile, in her executive cabin, Claire sat with her laptop, digging through old university records. She had connected to the resort's secure network and was searching through archived articles about Elliot Vance's time as a visiting professor at Georgetown Law 8 years ago. A headline caught her eye: "Law School Controversy Quietly Resolved." The article was vague, mentioning only an unnamed top student who had accused a visiting professor of academic sabotage before withdrawing the claim and dropping out. The professor was never named, but the timing matched Elliot's guest lecturing. Period. Claire picked up her phone and dialed a number. "James? It's Claire Harper. Sorry to call so late, but I need to use that favor you owe me." "Yes, it's about Georgetown Law. Do you remember a student named Serena Jackson? She would have been there about 8 years ago. Apparently, she was supposed to be top of her class." The next morning dawned bright and clear. Malcolm Vance walked along the lakeside path, his hands in his pockets, mind still troubled by the previous night's incident. He spotted Serena cleaning the windows of the resort's library and approached her. "Excuse me," he said hesitantly. Serena turned, her expression guarded when she recognized Elliot's son. "I wanted to apologize for my father's behavior last night," Malcolm said. It was completely out of line. Serena studied him for a moment. "You don't need to apologize for him." "Still, I wanted to." Malcolm shifted uncomfortably. "Were you really his student?" Serena returned to her window cleaning. "You remind me of him before the mask." Malcolm wasn't sure if it was a compliment or an insult. "What does that mean?" "It means he wasn't always the man you see now," Serena replied without turning around. "People change when power changes them." Before Malcolm could respond, Claire appeared around the corner of the building. Seeing the two in conversation, she hesitated, then approached. "Malcolm, your father's looking for you. Something about the investor presentation this afternoon." Malcolm nodded, gave Serena one last curious look, then headed back toward the main building. Once he was gone, Claire turned to Serena. "Can we talk?" "Privately." Serena set down her cleaning supplies. "Miss Harper, I'd like to keep my job, at least until I decide to leave it. So with all due respect, you were his student, weren't you?" Claire interrupted, keeping her voice low. "At Georgetown." Serena's expression revealed nothing, but she gave a slight nod. "What happened?" Claire asked. "This place protects men like him," Serena replied, her voice flat. "Nothing happened. That's the point." Claire glanced around to ensure they were alone. "I looked you up. You were on track to graduate top of your class. Full scholarship. Then suddenly, nothing. You disappeared from the legal world entirely. People disappear for all sorts of reasons, Miss Harper." "Claire, please." She leaned in closer. "I need to understand what happened. Not for him, for me. For this company." Serena looked at her thoughtfully. "Why do you care?" "Because I've worked under Elliot for 7 years, and there have been incidents. Rumors. Women who left suddenly. I've always told myself they were just rumors." After a long moment, Serena spoke. "Meet me after my shift ends. 8 o'clock. By the boat dock." As Serena walked away, her mind drifted back to 8 years earlier. The prestigious lecture hall at Georgetown Law was packed with eager students. Professor Elliot Vance, already a rising star in the consulting world, but still teaching occasional guest seminars, stood at the front of the room discussing corporate ethics. "Ethics are important," he was saying, "but sometimes the most ethical decision is the one that preserves the greater good. In this case, shareholder value." Serena, then a 21-year-old scholarship student, raised her hand. "But isn't that circular reasoning, Professor? If we define greater good solely as shareholder value, we're not actually discussing ethics at all." The class turned to look at her. Vance's smile tightened slightly. "Ms. Jackson, while I appreciate your enthusiasm, I think you're confusing philosophical ethics with practical business leadership." "I don't think I am, sir," Serena pressed. "The law requires corporate officers to consider more than just shareholder value. There's a fiduciary duty to the company itself, which includes employees, community impact." "That's enough, Ms. Jackson." Vance cut her off, his tone hardening. "Perhaps you should review the basics before challenging established principles." The memory faded as Serena continued her cleaning duties. That had been the beginning, a simple classroom disagreement that somehow became much more. After that day, Vance had seemed to take a special interest in undermining her, subtly at first, then more openly as time went on. Later that afternoon, Marjorie found Serena organizing linens in a supply closet. "He's asking about you again," the older woman said without preamble. Serena continued folding. "Let him ask." Marjorie closed the door behind her. "I knew who you were when you applied, you know." Serena looked up, surprised. "I read about what happened," Marjorie continued. "Not the official version. The truth. My niece was at Georgetown when it happened. Then you know why I'm here." Marjorie nodded. "You're not the first woman he's destroyed. There was an assistant about 5 years ago, Rebecca Winters. She accused him of misconduct, and then suddenly she was gone. No references, no career. What happened to her? Last I heard, she moved to Portland. Changed fields entirely. Works as an artist now." Serena absorbed this information. "Thank you." "Marjorie, be careful," the older woman warned. "He has more power now than he did when you knew him." That evening, Claire sat in her rental car outside a small gallery in the nearby town. After her conversation with Serena that morning, she'd made some calls and discovered that Rebecca Winters, Elliot's former executive assistant, had indeed moved to the area and opened a small art studio. The gallery was quiet, with only a few patrons browsing the abstract paintings that covered the walls. A woman in her mid-30s with short-cropped hair approached Claire. "Can I help you find something specific?" Claire recognized her from old company photos. "Rebecca Winters?" The woman's friendly expression immediately closed. "Gallery's closing in 10 minutes. Please," Claire said quickly. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm trying to understand something about Elliot Vance." Rebecca glanced around the gallery, then motioned Claire to follow her into a back office. Once the door was closed, she spoke in a low voice. "Whatever he's done now, I can't help you. I signed an NDA. I'm not asking you to break it," Claire assured her. "I just need to know if there's a pattern." "There's a woman, Serena Jackson." Rebecca's eyes widened slightly. "The law student? She's back." Claire nodded. "She's working as a maid at the resort where we're having our leadership retreat. She confronted Elliot last night." Rebecca let out a soft whistle. "She's either very brave or very foolish." "What happened to you, Rebecca?" "The official story is that you made accounting errors that nearly tanked a major deal, then resigned when they were discovered." Rebecca's laugh was bitter. "Is that what he said? I found discrepancies in the books. Money being funneled to shell companies, fake consultants on the payroll. When I brought it to Elliot's attention, he said he'd look into it. 2 weeks later, I was being escorted out by security, accused of the very thing I'd reported." "Do you have proof?" Rebecca shook her head. "I tried to gather some, but they locked me out of all systems." Then came the legal threats, the NDA, the settlement that barely covered my moving expenses. She paused. "Tell Serena to walk away. He won't stop until she's ruined again." Back at the resort, Malcolm sat in his cabin reviewing company financial records on his laptop. Something about Serena's words had disturbed him, and he found himself looking at his father's company with fresh eyes. He had always admired his father's business acumen, even as he questioned his personal ethics. Now, he was beginning to wonder if the two were more connected than he'd realized. That a knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. It was Claire. "Can we talk?" she asked, looking around nervously. "Not here. Somewhere private." They walked down to the lakeside, away from the cabins and main buildings. "I found Elliot's former assistant," Claire said once they were alone. "Her story matches what I suspect happened to Serena. Your father has a pattern, Malcolm. When women challenge him, they disappear professionally." Malcolm ran a hand through his hair. "I've always known he was tough, even ruthless in business. But this is different." "I need your help," Claire said. "If we're going to understand what really happened to Serena, to Rebecca, maybe to others, we need access to records that only family might have." "You're asking me to go against my father." "I'm asking you to help find the truth." Malcolm was quiet for a long moment. "There's a storage unit in the city. Dad keeps old records there, things he doesn't want at the office or at home. I have the key." Claire nodded. "We should go tomorrow. But first, I need to meet with Serena. Tonight." As dusk fell over the lake, Serena waited at the boat dock, watching the sunset paint the water in shades of orange and purple. She heard footsteps on the wooden planks and turned to see Claire approaching. "You came," Serena said, a hint of surprise in her voice. "I said I would." Claire sat on a bench overlooking the water. "I spoke with Rebecca Winters today." Serena's eyebrows rose. "Marjorie mentioned her. Her story has similarities to yours. From what little I know, Elliot seems to have a method for dealing with women who threaten him." "It's not just women," Serena said quietly. "It's anyone who challenges his authority or his ethics. But women get the worst of it." Claire hesitated, then asked, "What did he do to you, Serena?" "Really?" Serena looked out over the lake. "After that first class, he began watching me, critiquing my arguments more harshly than others, questioning my sources, my reasoning. It was subtle at first. Then he became a guest lecturer in another of my classes. By then, I was being considered for a prestigious judicial internship, the kind that makes careers." She paused, her fingers twisting together in her lap. "The day before final interviews, someone leaked that I'd cheated on an ethics exam. The irony wasn't lost on me. There was an investigation, and while I was eventually cleared, the damage was done. The internship went to someone else." "That's terrible, but not career-ending," Claire observed. "No, it wasn't. Not yet." Serena's voice hardened. "But rumors spread. Other opportunities fell through. Then my scholarship was suddenly under review. I later found out Elliot had written a character reference that was really a character assassination. By the time I pieced it all together, I had no money, no scholarship, and no future in law. And now you're here, working as a maid at his company retreat, Claire said softly. Why? Serena finally turned to look at her. Because running didn't work. Because hiding didn't work. Because I spent 8 years watching him rise while I scrubbed floors, and I realized that silence only protects men like him. What do you want, Serena? Justice? Truth? I'm not sure there's a difference anymore. Claire nodded slowly. Malcolm and I are going to the city tomorrow to look through some old records. His father keeps a storage unit with files that aren't at the office. He'll have covered his tracks. Maybe. But people like Elliot always believe they're too smart to get caught. They get careless. As they spoke, neither woman noticed the figure watching them from the shadows of the boathouse. Detective Roy Keller, the private investigator. Elliot had hired to dig into Serena's past, lowered his camera, and frowned. This assignment was becoming more complicated than he'd anticipated. In his luxury cabin, Elliot paced back and forth, phone pressed to his ear. I don't care what it takes, he growled. Find something on her. Everyone has secrets. Everyone has dirt. Get me something I can use. He ended the call and stared out at the darkened lake, unaware that the very people he trusted most were beginning to question everything he'd built. Back in her small room, Serena opened her laptop and began typing. The document header read, Whistleblower Statement. She worked late into the night, documenting everything she remembered about her time at Georgetown, every interaction with Elliot Vance, every piece of evidence she'd managed to salvage. She didn't send it. Not yet. But for the first time in 8 years, she allowed herself to feel something like hope. The next morning, as the executives gathered for breakfast and strategy sessions, Serena moved through the resort with renewed purpose. She knew Claire and Malcolm would be leaving soon too. Check the storage unit. She knew Elliot was watching her, waiting for her to make a mistake. And she knew Marjorie was protecting her as much as she could. What she didn't know was that Detective Keller had spent the night researching her background and had found something strange. Large portions of her history appeared to have been systematically erased or altered. As an investigator who prided himself on thoroughness, this piqued his interest far more than finding dirt to give his client. Something wasn't right about this case, and Roy Keller was beginning to think he might be working for the wrong side. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Aspen Pines resort as Claire and Malcolm prepared to leave for the city. They had told everyone they were going for supplies, a plausible excuse that wouldn't raise suspicions. As they walked toward Claire's rental car, Malcolm noticed his father watching from the main building's veranda. He's watching us, Malcolm muttered, not turning his head. Claire kept her pace steady. Just act normal. We're just going into town, remember? They got into the car and drove away. Malcolm glancing in the side mirror to see his father still standing there, phone to his ear. Back at the resort, Elliot entered the conference room where several board members were reviewing quarterly reports. They looked up as he strode in, his confidence never wavering despite the previous night's incident. Gentlemen, ladies, he nodded. I trust you all slept well. Board member William Patterson, a silver-haired man in his 60s, peered at Elliot over his reading glasses. Quite a show last night, Elliot. A minor staffing issue, Elliot waved dismissively. Nothing to concern yourselves with. The maids seem to know you, remarked Janet Walsh, one of the newer board members. Former student, she said. Elliot's smile remained fixed. I've guessed. Lectured at various universities over the years. Impossible to remember every face. Before anyone could press further, Elliot launched into a detailed analysis of the upcoming quarter's projections, effectively changing the subject. But he noticed the glances exchanged between board members, the seed of doubt already planted. Meanwhile, Claire and Malcolm arrived at a storage facility on the outskirts of the city. Row after row of identical units stretched before them, the place eerily quiet on a weekday morning. It's Unit 247, Malcolm said, checking his phone. I have the entry code from when Dad had me drop off some boxes last year. They found the unit, and Malcolm entered the code. The padlock clicked open, and he slid up the metal door to reveal a surprisingly large space filled with neatly labeled boxes and filing cabinets. Your father doesn't believe in digital storage, Claire asked, surveying the room. He says the only truly secure information is the kind that can't be hacked, Malcolm replied, moving to a filing cabinet. We should start with personnel records. If he kept anything about Rebecca Winters or other assistants, it would be there. They began searching methodically, careful to return everything to its exact place. After an hour, Malcolm called Claire. Over. Look at this, he said, holding up a folder. Employee separation agreements. There are dozens here, all with women's names, all with the same template. Claire took the folder and flipped through it. These NDAs are incredibly restrictive, and the settlements are tiny compared to what these positions would normally warrant. Here's Rebecca's, Malcolm pointed. And look at the date, just 2 weeks after she reported financial irregularities. Claire pulled out her phone and took pictures of the documents. This shows a pattern, but it's still circumstantial. We need something that directly links your father to wrongdoing. They continued searching until Malcolm found a locked drawer in the back of a filing cabinet. This might be something, he said, examining the lock. Can you open it? Malcolm pulled out his keys and tried several before finding one that fit. Dad gave me this emergency key ring years ago. Never thought I'd use it like this. The drawer opened to reveal a single file labeled Academic References. Inside were copies of letters Elliot had written for various students over the years. Most were glowing recommendations, but a section in the back contained what could only be described as character assassinations, including one for Serena Jackson. Claire read it aloud. Despite her academic achievements, Ms. Jackson has demonstrated concerning ethical lapses that call into question her suitability for positions of trust. This is vicious and completely fabricated, said Malcolm, his face pale. Dad was systematically destroying careers. As they continued reading, neither noticed the storage facility's security camera blinking in the corner. Back at the resort, Serena was cleaning the executive conference room when she overheard 2 board members talking in lowered voices. I looked her up, one was saying. Serena Jackson was top of her class at Georgetown until some cheating scandal. The timing matches when Elliot was guest lecturing there. You think there's something to her claim? I think it's odd that Elliot's so rattled by a maid. Serena kept her head down, absorbing the information that the board was already curious. She finished her work and headed back to the staff area, unaware that she was being followed. Detective Keller had spent the morning investigating discrepancies in Serena's background. Public records showed she'd been at Georgetown Law on a full scholarship, consistently at the top of her class, until suddenly she wasn't. Her academic records simply stopped, with no explanation, no transfer, no graduation. It was as if someone had deliberately erased her. Now, watching her move through the resort, Keller felt increasingly uncomfortable with his assignment. He'd been hired to find dirt on her, but everything he discovered pointed to her being the victim, not the perpetrator. As Keller pondered his next move, Claire and Malcolm returned to the resort, their car trunk filled with grocery bags to maintain their cover story. They needed to speak with Serena, but with Elliot watching them closely, arranging a meeting would be difficult. The opportunity came during the afternoon session break. Claire spotted Serena restocking towels in the ladies' room and slipped inside. We found something, she whispered, checking that they were alone. Letters your professor wrote about you, deliberately damaging your reputation. Serena's hands stilled. I always suspected, but never had proof. We have it now. And more, a pattern of similar behavior with other women. Malcolm's making copies. As we speak, Serena looked at Claire with new respect. Why are you doing this? You're risking your career. Because I've spent 7 years watching good people get crushed while helping build a company I'm increasingly ashamed of, Claire answered. Honestly, and because it could have been me. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of someone entering. Claire quickly exited a stall and washed her hands as Janet Walsh from the board entered. Miss Harper, Janet nodded. Preparing for the afternoon presentation. Just finishing up, Claire smiled professionally. I'll see you in there. As Claire left, Janet's gaze lingered on Serena, a flicker of recognition in her eyes. The afternoon session was tense. Elliot presented brilliantly as always, but Claire noticed the board members watching him with subtle scrutiny. Malcolm sat quietly, his expression guarded. After the presentation, during cocktails, William Patterson approached Elliot. Impressive numbers, as always, he said, swirling his scotch. Though I'm curious about the staff turnover rate in your executive office. Seems unusually high. Elliot's smile tightened slightly. Top talent is always in demand. We serve as an excellent launching pad for ambitious professionals. Interesting. I had lunch with Roger Stevens at Anderson Consulting last month. He mentioned hiring one of your former assistants. Said she was brilliant but strangely reluctant to discuss her time with you. Before Elliot could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression darkened. Excuse me, William. Something requires my attention. Elliot strode away, answering the call in a low, angry voice. The security company at the storage facility had alerted him to unauthorized access. Using Malcolm's code, that evening, Elliot summoned Claire to his private cabin. When she arrived, he was standing by the window, a glass of whiskey in hand. You've been busy today, Claire, he said without turning around. Claire kept her voice neutral. Just routine preparation for tomorrow's presentations. Is that what you call digging through my personal records? Conspiring with my son? Claire felt a chill, but maintained her composure. I don't know what you're talking about. Elliot turned, his eyes cold. Don't insult my intelligence. The storage facility has cameras. I saw you both. If you have nothing to hide, why does it matter? Claire challenged. You've been with this company for 7 years, Elliot said, ignoring her question. I've mentored you, promoted you, given you opportunities others would kill for. And this is how you repay me? By snooping around with a maid. This isn't about loyalty, Elliot. It's about right and wrong. Such a childish view, he sneered. Business isn't about morality. It's about winning. I built this company from nothing, and I won't let anyone, not you, not my son, and certainly not some washed-up law student with a grudge, tear it down. What did Serena ever do to you except challenge your ideas? Claire asked. Why destroy her career? Elliot's laugh was cold. She was a scholarship student who thought she could lecture me on ethics. She needed to learn her place. And Rebecca Winters? The others? Collateral damage. This conversation is over, Claire. You have a choice to make. Drop this witch hunt now, or clean out your office when we return. You're threatening me. I'm giving you the courtesy of a warning, which is more than I gave the others. Elliot set down his glass. Choose wisely. As Claire left Elliot's cabin, she spotted Malcolm waiting nearby. He knows, she said quietly as they walked toward the lake. I figured he would. The storage facility called him. He threatened my job. Malcolm looked grim. Just your job? That's restraint for him. What do we do now? We need to move faster, Malcolm said. I've been thinking. We have the board's attention already. Several members have asked me questions. Today, if we can get Serena's story and our evidence in front of them before my father can control the narrative. Claire nodded. Tomorrow morning, there's a pre-board session. Elliot won't expect us to move so quickly. Unknown to them, Detective Keller sat in his car at the edge of the property, reviewing his findings. His client had hired him to find dirt on Serena Jackson, but all he'd found was evidence of Elliot Vance's systematic abuse of power. As an investigator with 20 years of experience, Keller prided himself on his integrity. He had a decision to make. The next morning, the resort buzzed with tension. Board members gathered for their private session before the day's events. Elliot arrived early, determined to head off any problems, but was surprised to find Claire and Malcolm already there, speaking with William Patterson and Janet Walsh. What's going on here? Elliot demanded, his voice sharp. William turned, his expression grave. Elliot, we've been hearing some concerning allegations that we feel need addressing. Allegations? From whom? From multiple sources, Janet said, calmly, including your own records. Before Elliot could respond, the door opened again, and Serena walked in. She was no longer in her housekeeping uniform, but dressed in a simple blouse and slacks. The room fell silent. What is she doing here? Elliot's voice was dangerously quiet. I invited her, Claire said. The board deserves to hear her story directly. This is preposterous. You can't possibly, Mr. Vance, William interrupted. We'd like to hear what Miss Jackson has to say. For the next 20 minutes, Serena spoke calmly and clearly about her experiences with Elliot at Georgetown, the systematic sabotage of her career, and her journey to working as a maid at his company. Claire and Malcolm presented the evidence they'd gathered, including the damaging reference letters and the pattern of similar treatment toward other women. Throughout the presentation, Elliot's face grew increasingly flushed. When they finished, he stood. "This is a coordinated attack on my character and my company," he declared. "This woman is clearly unstable, harboring an 8-year grudge over academic criticism. As for these documents, they've been taken out of context or manipulated. And what about these?" A new voice joined the conversation as Detective Keller entered the room, holding a flash drive. "Email records showing systematic targeting of women who challenged you, Mr. Vance. Financial irregularities covered up by blaming assistants. Character assassination campaigns against former employees." Elliot stared at his hired investigator in disbelief. "What the hell are you doing?" "My job," Keller replied simply. "Finding the truth." He handed the flash drive to William. "Everything is there, documented and verified. I was hired to dig up dirt on Ms. Jackson. Instead, I found this." The board members exchanged glances. Janet spoke first. "I think we need to review this material immediately. Elliot, perhaps you should step out while we deliberate." "This is my company," Elliot shouted, losing his composure entirely. "You can't do this." "Actually, we can," William said firmly. "Board bylaws are quite clear on this matter." As security was called to escort Elliot out, he pointed at Serena. "You think you've won? This isn't over." Once he was gone, Serena looked around the stunned room and said quietly, "You built an empire by burying truth. I'm here to dig it up." The emergency board meeting lasted for hours. Half the members wanted an immediate vote of no confidence. Others insisted on time to verify all allegations. The resort buzzed with rumors as executives tried to piece together what was happening behind closed doors. Serena waited in a small meeting room with Claire and Malcolm, the adrenaline of confrontation fading into anxious anticipation. "What happens now?" she asked. "Best case, the board removes him as CEO, pending a full investigation," Claire answered. "Worst case, they circle the wagons, protect him, and we all lose our jobs." "I'm sorry I dragged you into this," Serena said. Malcolm shook his head. "You didn't drag us anywhere. We chose this." William Patterson entered the room, his expression somber. "The board is divided. We're adjourning until tomorrow to review Detective Keller's evidence more thoroughly." "And Elliot?" Claire asked. "He's been asked to remain in his cabin and not contact anyone until tomorrow's vote. Security is ensuring he complies." William looked at Serena. "Ms. Jackson, I owe you an apology. I've served on this board for 5 years and had no idea." "Most people don't see what they're not looking for," Serena replied as they left the resort to find somewhere to eat in town. None of them noticed a junior executive slipping into his car, phone pressed to his ear. He was calling Jason Ford, a reporter friend at the Business Insider. "Jason, I've got the story of the year for you. Elliot Vance is about to be ousted in a massive scandal." The next morning, headlines exploded across business news sites. CEO accused of career sabotage. Fraud, former student speaks out. The story spread like wildfire, with details, some accurate, some exaggerated, about Serena's confrontation and the subsequent investigation. Elliot's PR team scrambled to respond, booking him on a friendly morning business show. Dressed impeccably, in a suit that probably cost more than Serena made in 3 months, he projected calm confidence. "These allegations are completely baseless," he told the sympathetic host. "Ms. Jackson was a student who received justified criticism of her work and has apparently harbored resentment for nearly a decade. As for the other claims, they're being manufactured by disgruntled former employees and, sadly, orchestrated by my own VP of Communications, who was passed over for promotion." "So you're saying this is essentially revenge?" the host prompted. "I built a multi-billion-dollar company through hard work and vision," Elliot replied. "Success breeds enemies. It's unfortunate, but not surprising." Back at the resort, Claire watched the interview with growing anger. "He's trying to paint you as bitter and me as resentful," she told Serena. "Classic deflection strategy." "Will it work?" Serena asked. "With some people, yes, but not with everyone. Not anymore." Marjorie Ellis knocked on the door of Claire's cabin, where they had gathered. "May I come in?" The head of housekeeping looked tired but determined as she handed Serena a folder. "I've kept this for years, not sure what to do with it. Now I know." Inside was a hard copy of a character reference Elliot had written for another student, dated the same week as Serena's. The language was nearly identical to the one he'd written to destroy Serena, but with the opposite intent, glowing praise for a student who had never challenged him. The wording is too similar to be coincidental, Marjorie explained. He had templates for building people up or tearing them down. I found this when I was cleaning his office during a renovation 4 years ago. This proves the reference letters weren't based on actual performance, Claire said, examining the documents. They were weapons. As they strategized their next move, Elliot remained secluded in his cabin, making calls to allies on the board. His confidence was shaken but not broken. He'd survived challenges before that a knock on his door revealed Claire. Her expression was resolute as she entered without waiting for an invitation. "Come to gloat?" Elliot asked bitterly. "No, I came to understand." "Understand what?" "What?" Claire sat across from him. "I've worked with you for 7 years. I respected you, even when I didn't always agree with your methods. What I don't understand is why someone as talented and successful as you needed to destroy people like Serena." Elliot's laugh was hollow. "You think this is about need? It's about consequences. People who challenge authority face consequences." She was a student asking questions in a classroom. She was questioning my expertise, my authority, in front of future business leaders. "Do you have any idea how that undermines everything I've built?" Claire stared at him, finally seeing clearly. "She wanted nothing from you. You gave her everything to destroy. Get out," Elliot said quietly. "And remember, when this is over, I'll still be standing. I always am." As Claire left, she passed Malcolm arriving to speak with his father. Their conversation was brief and painful. By the end, Malcolm had formally called for a vote of no confidence against his own father, a move that visibly shook Elliot for the first time. "The vote is scheduled for tomorrow morning," Malcolm informed Claire afterward. "Dad still has 3 solid supporters on the board. We need 7 votes to remove him." That evening, a local news station requested an interview with Serena. After some hesitation, she agreed. Sitting in the resort garden, surrounded by flowers that seemed at odds with the tension in the air, Serena spoke calmly about her experiences. "I was a scholarship student from a working-class family," she explained. "Law school was my dream, my way to make a difference. When Professor Vance targeted me, I lost not just opportunities, but my sense of worth." "What would you say to other women in similar situations?" the reporter asked. Serena looked directly into the camera. "Silence protects the powerful. He taught me that silence can be weaponized. But he also taught me how dangerous silence can be when it's finally broken." The interview went viral overnight, generating thousands of supportive comments and bringing forward other former students and employees with similar stories. Meanwhile, Detective Keller had continued his investigation, tracking down a legal aide who had worked with Elliot years ago. The aide had kept a letter, never sent, confessing to his role in fabricating evidence against Serena and others. Keller delivered this letter anonymously to Serena's hotel room with a simple note: "For tomorrow." The morning of the vote arrived with a tense atmosphere hanging over the resort. The board gathered in the main conference room, executives huddled in groups outside, speculating on the outcome. Elliot arrived looking confident, nodding to supporters as he entered. The meeting began behind closed doors. William Patterson presided, outlining the allegations and evidence. Elliot was given time to defend himself, which he did with practiced eloquence. Then came the discussion, heated at times, as board members argued both sides' point. One of Elliot's strongest supporters, James Reynolds, had been wavering after seeing the mounting evidence. When Serena presented the newly discovered confession letter, authenticated by the board's legal counsel, Reynolds finally switched sides. "I've known you for 15 years, Elliot," he said heavily. "I wanted to believe this was all a misunderstanding, but the evidence is overwhelming." The vote was held, 6-3 in favor of removing Elliot as CEO, with 1 abstention. When Elliot was informed of the decision, his face flushed with rage. "This company is mine," he shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "I built it from nothing." "You're not indispensable, Elliot," Williams said firmly. "You're a liability." Security was called to escort him from the building. As he was led through the lobby, staff members lined the hallway, silently watching his exit. Among them stood Serena, her expression revealing nothing as their eyes met briefly. Outside, Elliot paused, straightening his jacket and squaring his shoulders before walking to his waiting car. His empire was crumbling, but his pride remained. Intact, back inside, the board named Claire interim CEO, pending a search for permanent leadership. The announcement was met with cautious optimism from the executives who had watched the drama unfold as the day ended. Serena found herself in the same ballroom where it had all begun just 4 days earlier. Now empty of guests, the room seemed smaller somehow. Malcolm found her there, standing by the window. "What happens now?" he asked, joining her. "For you? For the company? Or for me?" "All of the above, I guess." Serena considered the question. "The company will recover. It's bigger than one man. You'll need to decide if you want to be part of rebuilding it or start fresh somewhere else. And you? I'm not sure yet. But for the first time in 8 years, I have choices." Malcolm nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "I'm sorry for what my father did to you." "You didn't choose him," Serena replied softly. "But now you get to choose who you'll be." As night fell over the resort, Serena returned to her small staff room and began packing her few belongings. A knock at the door revealed Claire. "The board would like to offer you a settlement," Claire said without preamble. "For what was done to you. I didn't do this for money. I know. But justice sometimes comes with compensation." Claire handed her an envelope. "There's something else. Elliot's legal team has already filed notice of a defamation lawsuit against you. He's asking for $10 million. Serena opened the envelope, skimmed the contents, then smiled slightly. "He's bluffing. He doesn't want discovery. But I do." Claire studied her with newfound respect. "You know, we're going to need someone to oversee our new ethics compliance program. Someone who understands firsthand why it's necessary. Are you offering me a job?" "I'm suggesting a possibility. Think about it." After Claire left, Serena sat on her bed, the settlement offer in one hand and her old law school textbook in the other. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, uncertainty felt like opportunity rather than fear. Outside her window, she could see the lights of the main building where executives were gathering for dinner, likely discussing the day's dramatic events. In the distance, a car's headlights disappeared down the long driveway. Elliot Vance, leaving the empire he had built, an empire that had just begun to crumble under the weight of long-buried truths. Serena closed her eyes and allowed herself a moment of peace. "Not anymore," she whispered to herself, echoing her words from the boardroom. Not his company, not his narrative, not his power over her, not anymore. The morning after Elliot's removal, Aspen Pines Resort hummed with tension and excitement. News crews had set up outside the gates, hoping to catch glimpses of the players in what business channels were calling the boardroom coup of the year. Inside, the company's PR team worked frantically to craft a statement that would reassure investors, clients, and employees. Claire sat in what had been Elliot's office less than 24 hours earlier, staring at the stock ticker on her laptop. As expected, shares had dropped 8% in pre-market trading. "It's not as bad as we feared," said Tom Williams, the chief financial officer, studying the same numbers over her shoulder. "The market hates uncertainty, but they also hate scandal. Once we announce our transition plan, things should stabilize." Claire nodded, barely hearing him. Her mind was on the emergency executive meeting scheduled for 10 o'clock. As interim CEO, she would be facing a room full of people who had been loyal to Elliot for years. "Has legal prepared the statement?" she asked. "It's being finalized now." Very measured, acknowledging the board's decision without detailing allegations. Standard crisis management. Claire closed her laptop. "We need to be better than standard. Tom, that's how we got here in the first place." Meanwhile, Serena had spent the morning in her room, fielding calls from reporters and declining all interview requests. She had one more day in her staff accommodation before she needed to leave. The settlement offer from the board sat unsigned on her desk. It was generous, more than enough to restart her life and possibly even return to law school. But something held her back from signing. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Malcolm standing there, looking tired but resolute. "Can we talk?" he asked. Serena gestured for him to enter the small room. Malcolm looked around at the sparse furnishings, a far cry from the luxury cabins reserved for executives and their families. "I wanted to tell you something before the announcement goes public," he said. "I'm resigning from the company." "Because of your father?" Malcolm shook his head. "Because I need to find my own path. I've been living in his shadow, following his blueprint. Maybe this is my chance to figure out who I am without him. That takes courage, Serena said softly. I learned it from watching you. Malcolm met her eyes. You stood up to him knowing what he could do to you. Again, what will you do now? I'm not sure yet, but I've been thinking about starting something focused on corporate accountability, helping whistleblowers, maybe. He hesitated. Actually, I wanted to ask if you'd consider being an advisor. Not now, but when things settle down. Serena was surprised. You don't even know me, Malcolm. I know enough. I know you had every reason to stay silent, and you didn't. I know you could have sought revenge, but you sought justice instead. He shrugged. That's the kind of perspective I want to learn from. After Malcolm left, Serena sat thinking about his offer. It was unexpected, but somehow felt right. Using her experience to help others in similar situations. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't defined by what Elliot Vance had taken from her. Across town, Elliot sat in his penthouse apartment, watching business news coverage of his removal. His phone had been ringing constantly, journalists seeking comments, board members expressing regret, and surprisingly, several competitors offering consulting positions. Elliot Vance might have been disgraced, but his reputation as a brilliant strategist remained intact. His lawyer, Andrew Pearson, spread documents across the coffee table. The defamation suit is ready to file, he said. $10 million against Jackson, plus separate actions against Claire Harper and the detective. We can argue they conspired to undermine your reputation with fabricated evidence. Will it stick? Elliot asked. Eyes still on the television. It doesn't need to. The goal is pressure, not victory. Most people can't afford to defend against protracted litigation. They'll settle. Elliot nodded. File it today. I want them served at the resort, publicly if possible. That's not advisable. Did I ask for your advice? Elliot snapped. I want them to feel what I felt, being humiliated in front of their peers. Andrew sighed but nodded. He'd worked with Elliot long enough to know when arguing was pointless. Back at the resort, the executive meeting was underway. Claire stood at the head of the table, acutely aware that just days ago, she would have been seated along the side, taking notes on Elliot's directives. The board has appointed me interim CEO while a search is conducted for permanent leadership. She began. During this transition, our priorities are stabilizing the company, reassuring clients, and addressing the cultural issues that brought us to this point. What cultural issues? Asked Bradley Thompson, VP of Sales and a longtime Elliot ally. One disgruntled ex-student makes accusations, and suddenly we have a cultural problem? Claire met his gaze steadily. Serena Jackson isn't alone, Bradley. Detective Keller found evidence of at least 7 other women whose careers were deliberately sabotaged after they challenged Elliot in some way. The board has reviewed this evidence and found it compelling enough to remove our founder and CEO. So yes, we have a cultural problem. The room fell silent. Then Lisa Daniels, head of client relations, spoke up. What do we tell our clients? They've been working with Elliot for years. His name is on the building. We tell them the truth, Claire replied, that our company is committed to integrity and accountability, even when it's difficult. That we're taking steps to ensure everyone who works here, or with us, is treated with respect. As they continued discussing the transition plan, a commotion erupted in the lobby. Serena, who had been crossing to the staff quarters, stopped to see what was happening. A process server had arrived, accompanied by a photographer from a local business journal. He was loudly asking for Serena Jackson, Claire Harper, and Detective Keller. Marjorie intercepted him before security could react. This is a private property, she said firmly. You can leave those documents with security and go. I have orders to deliver these personally, the server insisted. And I have orders to call the police if you don't leave immediately, Marjorie countered, her voice steely. The standoff ended when Serena stepped forward. I'm Serena Jackson. The server handed her 3 envelopes with a smirk. You've been served. All of you. The photographer snapped several photos before security finally escorted them out. Serena opened her envelope to find Elliot's defamation lawsuit, demanding $10 million in damages. As she read, Claire emerged from the conference room, alerted by the commotion. What's going on? She asked, then saw the legal documents in Serena's hands. He didn't waste any time. He's trying to scare us, Serena replied, her voice calm despite the outrageous sum on the papers. He doesn't want this going to court. How can you be so sure? Because discovery works both ways. Everything he's trying to hide would become part of the public record. Serena handed Claire her own envelope. He's bluffing. Claire read the lawsuit, her face growing increasingly incredulous. This is ridiculous. He's claiming we orchestrated a conspiracy to overthrow him based on manufactured evidence. That's Elliot, always projecting his own tactics onto others. Later that afternoon, Serena was surprised to receive a call from Patricia Goldman, a reporter from the Washington Post who had covered legal ethics for over 20 years. "Ms. Jackson, I've been following your story with interest," Patricia began. "I'd like to do an in-depth piece, not on the scandal itself, but on the systemic issues it represents, how powerful men in academia and business can derail careers with impunity." "Why me?" "There are hundreds of women with similar stories. Because you fought back. And because I remember your name from Georgetown. I interviewed you once for a piece on scholarship students breaking barriers in elite law schools." Serena's breath caught. Someone remembered her from before, not as a maid, not as a victim, but as the promising student she had once been. "Would you be willing to speak with me?" Patricia asked. After a moment's hesitation, Serena agreed. The interview was scheduled for the following day. That evening, as Serena packed the last of her belongings, her phone buzzed with text messages from unknown numbers. Word of the lawsuit had spread, and Elliot's supporters were making their feelings known. Most messages were merely unpleasant, but a few contained explicit threats to A.S. Serena blocked number after number. There was a knock at her door. She opened it cautiously to find not one person, but a group. 5 women in housekeeping uniforms, 3 former administrative assistants who still worked at the company, and 2 female executives. "Can we come in?" asked one of the housekeepers, a young woman named Taylor. Serena's small room couldn't hold them all, so they moved to the staff break room. Once there, Taylor spoke again. "We wanted you to know you're not alone. After what happened with you and Mr. Vance, people started talking." She gestured to the group. "We all have stories. Different, but the same." One by one, they shared experiences of belittlement, passed over promotions, inappropriate comments, and in 2 cases, career sabotage similar to what Serena had endured. As they talked, Serena realized they weren't just sharing, they were forming a network, a support system. "What are you planning to do?" she asked. "We're documenting everything," said Rachel, one of the executives. "Building a case stronger than any single testimony. If he's suing you, we want to help." "Why now? Why not before?" "Because you showed us it was possible," Taylor answered simply. "You stood up to him and didn't get crushed." The next morning, Claire was preparing for a video conference with major clients when her assistant interrupted. "There's something you need to see," he said, pulling up a business news website on his tablet. The headline read, "Former Vance employees speak out. Culture of fear and retaliation." Beneath it was a photograph of a group of women, the same group that had gathered with Serena the night before, standing together outside the resort. "This changes everything," Claire murmured, quickly scanning the article. None of the women had given their names, but their collective testimony painted a damning picture of life under Elliot's leadership. By noon, 3 more former employees had contacted the journalist, adding their stories to the growing chorus. Social media erupted with the hashtag Vance Survivors as women from across the business world shared similar experiences with powerful men who had faced no consequences for their actions. In his penthouse, Elliot watched the coverage with mounting rage. He called his lawyer. "I want them all added to the lawsuit. Every single one." "Elliot, that would be extremely unwise," Andrew cautioned. "The optics of suing a dozen women. I don't care about optics. They're destroying what's left of my reputation." "No, they're sharing their experiences. There's a difference, legally and ethically." "Since when do you care about ethics?" "I pay you to win." There was a long pause on the line. "Perhaps you should find new representation, Elliot. I'll have my office prepare the withdrawal paperwork." The day of Serena's interview with the Washington Post dawned clear and bright. She had moved to a small hotel in the city, using part of her last paycheck from the resort. The settlement offer remained signed in her bag, not rejected, just on hold until she decided her next steps. Patricia Goldman arrived promptly at 10, a veteran journalist whose penetrating questions quickly cut to the heart of the matter. "Looking back," she asked, What was the moment you decided to speak up after 8 years of silence? Serena considered the question. It wasn't when he yelled at me in that ballroom. It was about a month earlier when I saw his face on the cover of Forbes in an article titled The Integrity Advantage. The subheading called him the moral compass of modern consulting. I realized then that silence doesn't just protect the powerful, it validates them. The interview lasted 2 hours, covering not just Elliot and the recent events, but the broader patterns in law, business, and academia that allowed such behavior to flourish. What would you say to other women facing similar situations? Patricia asked as they concluded. Serena didn't hesitate. I tell them that some men build empires on silence. But silence is a choice, not an obligation. As Patricia was leaving, she handed Serena a business card. A friend of mine at Georgetown Law. She's the new dean of students. She'd like to talk to you about your options for completing your degree. Serena stared at the card, a rush of emotions catching her off guard. I'm not sure that's possible anymore. Just call her, Patricia urged. You've got nothing to lose. Meanwhile, Detective Keller had been busy. After being named in Elliot's lawsuit, he decided to go on the offensive, reaching out to contacts at the SEC about the financial irregularities Rebecca Winters had originally reported years ago. His investigation had uncovered what appeared to be a pattern of minor fraud, not enough to bring down the company, but certainly enough to interest federal regulators. Keller arranged to meet Claire at a coffee shop away from the resort. When she arrived, he pushed a folder across the table. The SEC is opening an informal inquiry based on what I found, he explained. Vance was skimming from client contracts, small amounts, spread across dozens of projects, but it adds up to millions over time. Claire flipped through the documents. How did he hide this from the board? Creative accounting and loyal deputies. The interesting part is that Rebecca Winters discovered it 5 years ago. Instead of fixing it, Vance made her the scapegoat and continued the practice. This changes our defense strategy completely, Claire mused. We're not just defending against his defamation claims. We're going on the offensive with evidence of actual fraud. Keller nodded. I've already shared this with Ms. Jackson's attorney. They're preparing a countersuit. That afternoon, Claire received unexpected news from the board. After an emergency session, they had voted to make her permanent CEO rather than conducting an external search. Your handling of this crisis has been exemplary, William Patterson told her. The board feels the company needs continuity right now, not more upheaval. Claire was stunned. I'm honored, but are you sure? There must be more experienced candidates. Experience didn't prevent this mess. Integrity might have. You've demonstrated that in abundance. William paused. There is one condition. The board wants a complete overhaul of our ethics policies and HR practices. We need someone to lead that initiative, someone with first-hand experience of what happens when those systems fail. Serena Jackson, Claire said immediately. William nodded. If she's willing. It would be a director-level position reporting directly to you, with a seat on the executive committee. Claire could hardly believe what she was hearing. Less than a week ago, Serena had been cleaning floors at the resort. Now she was being offered a leadership role in the very company that had once ignored her. Later that day, Claire met with Serena at her hotel to extend the offer in person. Head of Ethics and Employee Advocacy, Claire explained. You'd be responsible for reforming our entire approach to workplace culture, reporting systems, and accountability mechanisms. Serena looked shocked. You want to hire me? After everything that's happened? Because of everything that's happened, who better to rebuild our ethics framework than someone who's seen firsthand how it failed? Claire leaned forward. This isn't charity or guilt, Serena. It's recognition of your unique qualifications. I don't have a law degree, Serena pointed out. Not a completed one, anyway. The dean at Georgetown called me this morning. They're offering you a path to complete your degree while working. Apparently, Patricia Goldman is very persuasive. Serena was silent for a long moment. I need time to think about it. Of course, but don't take too long. We need to announce our new leadership team by the end of the week. The next day, Serena visited Georgetown Law for the first time in 8 years. The campus had changed little. Still the same imposing buildings, still the same ambitious students hurrying between classes. She felt out of place, yet strangely. At home, as she made her way to the dean's office, she waited in the reception area. A young black woman approached her hesitantly. Excuse me, are you Serena Jackson? Serena nodded, surprised to be recognized. I saw your interview, the student explained. I just wanted to say thank you. I almost dropped out last semester after a similar experience with a professor. But seeing you stand up to Vance. She straightened her shoulders. Because of you, I stayed in the program. The simple statement hit Serena with unexpected force. Her fight hadn't just been about her own justice. It had created space for others to find theirs. The meeting with the dean was brief but productive. Georgetown would allow Serena to complete her final year through a combination of evening classes and independent study. The cheating allegations had been expunged from her record after an internal review found them baseless. As Serena left the campus, her phone rang. It was Malcolm. I heard about the job offer, he said without preamble. Are you going to take it? I'm still deciding. What about you? Any progress on your new venture? Actually, yes. I've been talking with some investors interested in backing a nonprofit focused on corporate accountability. They're excited about the concept. He paused. I meant what I said about wanting your input, Serena, not just as an advisor. I'd like you on the board. Serena laughed softly. Malcolm, a week ago I was cleaning hotel rooms. And now you're the only person I know who's successfully held a corporate titan accountable. That's exactly the perspective we need. That evening, Serena sat in her hotel room with two offers in front of her. The job with Vance Consulting, soon to be renamed, Claire had mentioned, and the board position with Malcolm's new venture. Both represented paths forward she couldn't have imagined days earlier. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. Elliot Vance drops defamation lawsuits amid SEC investigation. She clicked through to read that Elliot had withdrawn all legal actions against her, Claire, and Detective Keller after the Securities and Exchange Commission announced a formal investigation into financial improprieties at his former company. The weight lifted from Serena's shoulders. She'd been confident the lawsuit was a bluff, but seeing it officially dropped still brought relief. The next morning, Serena called Claire. I've made my decision, she said. I'll take the position, with two conditions. Name them. First, I want to complete my law degree while working. That means a flexible schedule for the next year. Absolutely. And the second, the company needs a complete overhaul, starting with its name. No more Vance Consulting. Claire chuckled. The board is already discussing alternatives. Any suggestions? Actually, yes. Integrity Partners. 3 days later, Serena walked into the corporate headquarters wearing a tailored suit instead of a housekeeping uniform. The receptionist, who had never acknowledged her presence before, now greeted her warmly. Ms. Jackson, welcome. Ms. Harper is waiting for you in the conference room. As Serena rode the elevator to the executive floor, she thought about the journey that had brought her here, from promising law student to hotel maid to corporate director in the span of 8 years. None of it had been planned, but all of it now seemed necessary. Claire introduced her at the executive committee meeting with a simple but powerful statement. Please welcome the only woman here who's already cleaned up our mess twice. Laughter broke the tension, and Serena found herself welcomed into a world that had once seemed permanently closed to her. In the weeks that followed, the company underwent significant changes. The board approved the name change to Integrity Partners. Claire implemented transparent hiring policies and established mental health resources for all staff. The HR department was completely restructured, with new procedures for reporting misconduct, and Serena began the work of building something new from the ruins of what had nearly destroyed her. She launched a mentorship initiative for employees from disadvantaged backgrounds. She rewrote the company's ethics code, emphasizing accountability at all levels. And she began teaching a monthly seminar for executives on recognizing and addressing power imbalances in the workplace. One evening, as she worked late in her new office, Serena noticed the cleaning staff arriving for their nightly duties. One woman, new and clearly nervous, was struggling with her equipment. Without hesitation, Serena stepped out to help her, showing her the most efficient way to organize her cart. The woman looked at her in surprise. Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Call me Serena, she replied with a smile. And you're welcome. Later, standing by the window of her office, Serena looked out at the city lights beginning to twinkle in the dusk. 8 years ago, she had believed this world was closed to her forever. Now she stood within it, not as a visitor or an imposter, but as someone who had earned her place through courage and persistence. This time, I stay, she whispered to herself, The words both a promise and a declaration of victory. 6 months had passed since the confrontation at Aspen Pines Resort. The spring sun warmed the glass and steel exterior of the Integrity Partners headquarters, formerly the Vance building, as employees streamed through its revolving doors. Inside the airy lobby, a new installation had replaced the imposing portrait of Elliot Vance, a wall of handwritten cards and notes, each bearing a single sentence that had changed someone's life. On the 28th floor, Serena Jackson stood before a room of 50 women from diverse backgrounds, recent graduates, mid-career professionals, and women returning to the workforce after extended absences. This was the inaugural session of the One Sentence Project, Serena's mentorship initiative for women facing barriers in professional spaces. Words have power, Serena began, her voice steady and confident. A single sentence can destroy a career or rebuild one. Today, we start reclaiming that power. The women listened intently as Serena shared her story, not as a victim, but as someone who had navigated a broken system and emerged stronger. She didn't sugarcoat the challenges or promise easy solutions, but offered something more valuable: practical strategies and genuine solidarity. After the session, Claire joined Serena in her office for their weekly check-in. The past 6 months had transformed both women. Claire had grown into her role as CEO with a blend of strategic vision and emotional intelligence that had stabilized the company faster than anyone expected. Serena had completed half of her remaining law school requirements while establishing Integrity Partners' new ethics framework from the ground up. The board is thrilled with the mentorship program, Claire said, settling into a chair across from Serena's desk. Applications are already coming in for the next cohort. That's good to hear. What about the employee satisfaction metrics? Claire smiled. Up 12 points since last quarter. The transparent promotion pathways are making a difference. People feel heard. And the clients? We lost 3 major accounts after the transition, but we've gained 7 new ones specifically because of our ethics reforms. Turns out, integrity is marketable. Serena nodded, not surprised. What about the housekeeping staff reforms? Implemented across all our properties. Claire confirmed. Better wages, advancement opportunities, educational benefits. Marjorie says applications have doubled. The mention of Marjorie brought a smile to Serena's face. The head of housekeeping had retired 2 months earlier, but not before helping redesign the staff structure to create genuine career paths for service workers. I got a letter from her yesterday, Serena said, reaching into her desk drawer. Listen to this. I cleaned messes too, long before you. I just didn't speak up. But you did. You made us proud. Claire's eyes softened. She was the unsung hero in all this. Without her protecting you that first night, everything would be different, Serena agreed. Their conversation was interrupted by Serena's assistant announcing Malcolm's arrival. At 23, Malcolm Vance had undergone perhaps the most dramatic transformation of all. Gone was the uncertain young man living in his father's shadow. In his place stood a focused, passionate advocate who had channeled his family resources into building something meaningful. Ladies, Malcolm greeted them with a warm smile. Sorry to interrupt. We were just finishing, Claire assured him, rising to leave. How's the nonprofit coming along? That's actually why I'm here. Malcolm took the seat Claire had vacated. The Accountability Project just received our first major grant. We're officially launching next month. Malcolm, that's wonderful, Serena exclaimed. We couldn't have done it without your guidance on the board, he said sincerely. Your perspective shaped our entire approach. After Claire left, Malcolm and Serena spent an hour discussing the nonprofit's upcoming initiatives. Their relationship had evolved into a respectful partnership based on shared values rather than shared trauma. There was no romantic undertone. Both recognized that would have been complicated by their history, but there was genuine friendship. Have you heard from your father? Serena asked as their meeting concluded. Malcolm's expression tightened slightly. He's in Switzerland, starting a new consulting firm with some European investors who either don't know or don't care about what happened here. How do you feel about that? Honestly, relieved. The further away he is, the easier it is to focus on my own path. Malcolm paused. The SEC investigation is still ongoing, though. My lawyer thinks charges are coming, eventually. Serena nodded, neither celebrating nor commiserating. Elliot's legal troubles were no longer her focus. And how are you, really? Malcolm considered the question seriously. I'm good. For the first time, I feel like I'm building something that matters, something that's mine, not his. Later that afternoon, Serena left the office early for a special engagement. Georgetown Law had invited her to give a guest lecture on ethics and accountability in corporate structures. As she rode in the taxi toward her old campus, memories washed over her, both painful and precious. The lecture hall was packed with students and faculty. Dean Patricia Lawson, who had helped facilitate Serena's return to her studies, introduced her with obvious pride. Ms. Jackson's journey exemplifies the resilience and integrity we hope to instill in all our students, the dean concluded. She has transformed personal adversity into systemic change. Serena approached the podium, the same one where Elliot Vance had once stood as a guest lecturer, dismissing her questions and undermining her confidence. The symmetry wasn't lost on her. 8 years ago, I sat where you're sitting, she began. I believed that excellence and hard work would be enough to succeed. I was wrong. Systems are designed to protect those who build them, and challenging those systems comes at a cost. She paused, looking out at the sea of attentive faces. But what I've learned since then, what I want to share with you today, is that the cost of silence is ultimately greater, for individuals and for society. For the next hour, Serena spoke about the intersection of ethics, power, and accountability in professional spaces. She didn't mention Elliot by name, but she didn't need to. Most in the audience knew her story from media coverage. Instead, she focused on structural solutions and individual courage. After the lecture, Dean Lawson approached with an unexpected offer. The faculty committee has voted to award you an honorary degree at next month's commencement. Your work exemplifies the values this institution aspires to uphold. Serena was stunned. Dean Lawson, I appreciate the gesture, but I'm still working to complete my actual degree, which you'll receive when you finish your coursework, the dean clarified. This is different, recognition of your contributions to legal ethics and corporate accountability. Will you accept? The request triggered a vivid memory. Sitting in the dean's office 8 years earlier, tears streaming down her face as she explained why she had to withdraw. The contrast between that moment of despair and this offer of recognition was overwhelming. Yes, Serena said finally. I would be honored. That evening, Serena worked late at Integrity Partners, finalizing a new whistleblower protection protocol. The office was quiet, most employees having left hours earlier. As she walked through the empty corridors toward the elevator, she passed the desk of a young woman, a recent hire in the accounting department who had come through Serena's mentorship program. The woman was carefully organizing files, her focus absolute. Something about her concentration, her determination to get every detail right, reminded Serena of herself at that age. Serena paused. Need any help? The woman looked up, startled. Oh, Ms. Jackson. No, I'm just finishing up the quarterly compliance documents. Good work, but don't stay too late. There's always tomorrow. The woman smiled. Thank you. Actually, I wanted to tell you. I applied for the junior analyst position that opened up. That's great. Let me know if you need any guidance preparing for the interview. As Serena continued to the elevator, she felt a profound sense of rightness. This was why she had fought so hard, not just for her own redemption, but to create space for others to thrive. Outside, the city stretched before her, its lights twinkling against the darkening sky. She had once believed this world had no place for her. Now she moved through it with purpose and authority, no longer invisible, no longer silent. Serena smiled at the sunset, painting the horizon in shades of gold and purple. This time, she wasn't just passing through. This time, she was here to stay. The next morning brought unexpected news. The SEC had filed formal charges against Elliot Vance for financial fraud and misrepresentation to shareholders. The case would likely take years to resolve, but the public filing itself was vindicating. Claire called an emergency executive meeting to prepare their response. This will trigger another wave of media attention, she warned the team. We need to be ready with a clear message that acknowledges our past while emphasizing our reforms. We should also prepare support resources for employees who might find this news triggering, Serena added, especially those who work directly under Elliot. The team worked efficiently, developing communication plans for clients, employees, And the press. What would have been a crisis under previous leadership was now handled with transparency and care, a testament to how much the company culture had changed. After the meeting, Serena received an unexpected visitor. Detective Roy Keller waited in the reception area, looking both professional and somewhat uncomfortable in the corporate environment. "Detective," Serena greeted him. "This is a surprise. Sorry to drop in unannounced," he said, rising to shake her hand. "I wanted to deliver this information personally." He handed her a sealed envelope. Inside was a copy of his final investigative report on Elliot Vance, officially closing his involvement in the case now that federal charges had been filed. "Thank you for your integrity," Serena said sincerely. "You could have just done what he paid you to do." Keller shook his head. "I've been an investigator for 25 years. My job is finding truth, not burying it." He hesitated. "There's something else you should know. When I was researching your background last year, I discovered that someone had systematically altered or deleted your records, academic transcripts, employment history, even rental applications. It was sophisticated work." "Elliot," Serena said, not really surprised. "Almost certainly. He was trying to erase you professionally, make it impossible for you to rebuild." Keller's expression hardened. "I've included documentation of the tampering in my report to the SEC. It demonstrates a pattern of behavior that strengthens their case." After Keller left, Serena sat at her desk, processing this new information. She had always suspected Elliot's vendetta extended beyond Georgetown, but having confirmation was still unsettling. How many others had suffered similar systematic erasure? The question reinforced her commitment to the work she was doing now. That evening, she finalized plans for expanding the One Sentence Project to 3 additional cities, creating support networks for women navigating hostile professional environments. Spring turned to summer. Serena's dual life as corporate executive and law student intensified. Each day brought new challenges and opportunities. Her honorary degree ceremony at Georgetown had made national news, with education and business publications highlighting her journey as an example of resilience and systemic change. In July, she stood on the stage of a TED conference, delivering a talk titled "Breaking Silence: The Power of a Single Sentence." The audience, corporate leaders, activists, and educators, gave her a standing ovation. Afterward, a woman approached her in the green room. "Ms. Jackson, I'm Lisa Cooper. I was a junior associate at Tinley and Marsh when Elliot Vance guest lectured there." Serena recognized the name immediately. "You were the one who got the judicial internship." Lisa nodded, looking pained. "The one he steered to me after sabotaging you. I didn't know then what had happened. By the time I pieced it together, you had disappeared from Georgetown." "It wasn't your fault," Serena assured her. "Maybe not, but I benefited from his actions. I've carried that knowledge for years." Lisa took a deep breath. "I'm a partner at Tinley now. We've created a fellowship program for students whose education was interrupted by circumstances beyond their control. I'd like to name it after you, if you're willing." The gesture touched Serena deeply. "Thank you, but the program itself matters more than the name. Call it whatever will help the most students." As summer faded into fall, Serena's schedule grew even more demanding. Between her executive role, board position at Malcolm's nonprofit, and final law school requirements, she rarely had a moment to herself. But unlike the exhaustion of her housekeeping days, this busy pace energized her. One crisp October evening, she found herself alone in the Integrity Partners building, having worked well past normal hours. As she gathered her things to leave, she realized it was exactly 1 year since the confrontation with Elliot at Aspen Pines Resort. 1 year since a single sentence had changed everything. On impulse, she took the elevator to the top floor and walked to the large windows overlooking the city. The company had thrived under Claire's leadership, not just surviving the transition, but emerging stronger and more purposeful. The ethics framework Serena had built was being studied and adopted by other corporations. The One Sentence Project had helped dozens of women reclaim their professional paths. As she stood there, Serena felt a deep sense of peace wash over her. The journey had been longer and harder than she could have imagined when she first entered Georgetown Law as a bright-eyed scholarship student. But standing here now, she wouldn't change it, not even the painful parts. Every step had shaped her into the woman she had become. She smiled at her reflection in the darkened glass, no longer invisible, no longer silent, no longer defined by what had been taken from her, but by what she had built in its place. 5 years had passed since Serena Jackson had stood up to Elliot Vance in that resort ballroom. The world had moved on, attention shifting to newer scandals and triumphs. But the ripples from that confrontation continued to spread, changing lives and institutions in ways no one could have predicted. The grand ballroom of the National Press Club hummed with anticipation as attendees found their seats for the Corporate Ethics Summit's keynote panel. At the center of the stage sat Serena, now 34 and a nationally recognized expert on workplace ethics and accountability. Her law degree hung proudly in her office alongside her numerous awards and recognitions. As moderator of the panel, Serena guided the discussion with the confidence of someone who had lived the issues being debated. Corporate leaders and advocacy organizations alike sought her perspective on creating truly equitable work environments. The challenge isn't just identifying what's broken, she told the audience. It's building something better in its place. Policies matter, but culture matters more. Claire Harper, still CEO of Integrity Partners, sat beside her on the panel. Under Claire's leadership, the company had not only recovered from the Elliot Vance scandal, but had become an industry leader in both performance and workplace culture. The two women had developed a partnership based on mutual respect and shared vision. As the panel concluded to enthusiastic applause, Claire leaned over to Serena. "I have news," she whispered. "The board approved the Jackson Center funding this morning. Full scholarship program, mentorship structure, everything you proposed." Serena's eyes widened. The Jackson Center for Integrity had been her dream project, a comprehensive initiative to support students and professionals from underrepresented backgrounds. Getting it fully funded was a major victory. "That's incredible," she breathed. "When can we announce it?" "At the reception tonight. The press is already there." Later, as they prepared for the announcement, a young black woman in a tailored suit approached Serena hesitantly. "Ms. Jackson, I'm Taylor Williams, your new intern. I start next week." Serena smiled warmly. "Welcome to the team, Taylor. I was just about to head into this reception, but let's schedule time to talk properly on Monday." Taylor nodded, her eyes bright with admiration. "I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity. I've followed your work since I was in college." As the young woman walked away, Claire joined Serena. "She reminds me of you." "I was thinking the same thing," Serena admitted. The reception was in full swing when they arrived, the room filled with business leaders, advocates, and media representatives. Serena scanned the crowd and spotted Malcolm, now 27, deep in conversation with a group of nonprofit leaders. His accountability project had grown into a respected organization with offices in 5 cities. When Malcolm saw her, he excused himself and came over. "The woman of the hour," he greeted her warmly. "Ready for your big announcement?" "More than ready," Serena replied. "How are things at the project?" "Busy. We just launched our whistleblower defense fund. 20 cases already this year." Their conversation was interrupted by a journalist who recognized Serena from her recent feature in Forbes. "Ms. Jackson, is it true that Elliot Vance has requested a meeting with you?" Serena was startled. "Where did you hear that?" "It's being reported that he's back in the country. Apparently, he's written a memoir and wants to discuss it with you before publication." Malcolm looked concerned, but Serena's expression remained calm. "If Mr. Vance contacts me, I'll consider the request like any other. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have an announcement to make." As the journalist moved away, Malcolm turned to Serena. "Would you really meet with him?" "I don't know," she answered honestly. 5 years ago, I would have said absolutely not. Now, she shrugged. "He doesn't have power over me anymore." That might be reason enough to hear what he has to say. The announcement of the Jackson Center was met with enthusiastic support. As Serena outlined the initiative's goals, supporting students from disadvantaged backgrounds, providing mentorship, creating pathways to leadership, she felt a profound sense of completion. What had begun as a personal quest for justice had evolved into a mission to change the systems that had failed her and so many others. After the reception, Serena declined offers to join colleagues for dinner, preferring to walk back to her apartment alone. The evening air was crisp, the city lights reflecting off the Potomac River as she crossed the bridge. She thought about the journalist's question about Elliot. The truth was, Elliot Vance had become increasingly irrelevant to her life. The SEC Case had ended in a settlement 3 years earlier, substantial fines, but no jail time. He had retreated to Europe, his reputation tarnished, but his wealth largely intact. Occasional articles mentioned new ventures or appearances, but the business world had moved on. Younger, more innovative leaders had taken center stage. In her apartment, Serena kicked off her heels and poured herself a glass of wine. On her bookshelf stood a small framed photograph, herself at 21, standing proudly on the Georgetown campus, full of hope and ambition. Beside it was a newer edition, her old maid's uniform, preserved in a shadow box with a simple plaque reading, "From service to power, one sentence at a time." The uniform was a reminder, not of humiliation, but of the journey that had shaped her. She had kept it deliberately, refusing to erase any part of her story, even the painful chapters. The next morning, Serena arrived at her office to find an envelope on her desk. Inside was a formal invitation to speak at a conference in London the following month. Also enclosed was a handwritten note from the organizer, explaining that Taylor Williams, her new intern, had made such a compelling case for Serena's inclusion that they had rearranged the program to feature her. Serena smiled, touched by the young woman's initiative. She buzzed her assistant. "Could you ask Taylor to come see me when she has a moment?" A few minutes later, Taylor entered, looking nervous. "You wanted to see me, Ms. Jackson?" "I did. Have a seat." Serena held up the invitation. "I understand you had something to do with this." Taylor straightened her shoulders. "Yes, ma'am. I interned with the conference organizers last summer. When I heard they were finalizing speakers, I sent them your TED Talk and some articles. I hope that wasn't overstepping." "Not at all. It was excellent initiative." Serena studied the young woman thoughtfully. "Tell me, Taylor, what are your goals?" "I want to work in corporate ethics and advocacy," Taylor replied without hesitation. "Creating systems that work for everyone, not just those at the top. That's why I hired you," Serena said with a smile. "Let's talk about how we can make that happen. What do you need from me to help you succeed?" As they began discussing Taylor's professional development plan, Serena felt a sense of the wheel turning full circle. Once, she had been the young woman with dreams, silenced by a system designed to protect the powerful. Now she was in a position to ensure another generation wouldn't face the same barriers. Later that day, Serena attended a board meeting at Malcolm's nonprofit. The Accountability Project had grown beyond its initial focus on corporate whistleblowers to address systemic issues in multiple industries. As a founding board member, Serena had helped shape its evolution. After the meeting, Malcolm showed her their newest initiative, a wall covered with handwritten notes, each containing a single sentence that had changed someone's life. Some were words of encouragement from mentors, others were moments of personal revelation. Several referenced Serena's own famous response to Elliot. "The one-sentence wall," Malcolm explained. "Inspired by your project, we invite visitors to add their own." Serena read through the notes, moved by the power of words to transform lives. At the center of the wall was a blank card and a pen. Malcolm gestured to it. "Would you add one?" Serena considered for a moment, then picked up the pen and wrote a single sentence. She didn't yell. She didn't beg. She didn't run. She simply stood and spoke. 5 years after a confrontation in a resort ballroom, those words had become her legacy, not just what she had done, but what she had inspired others to do. Stand up. Speak out. Change the world, one sentence at a time. As Serena left the building, the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple. She paused to appreciate the view, grateful for the journey that had brought her here. Every painful step, every hard-won victory, every moment of doubt and determination. The path hadn't been straight or easy. But standing here now, Serena Jackson knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. What would you sacrifice to speak your truth in a world that tries to silence you? Like and subscribe for more stories of courage that remind us one sentence can change everything.